Good afternoon, UK Crime Book Club. We seem to have a little bit of a delay between the four of us, so do bear with us. But I'm delighted to introduce you to Graham, Lesley and Kate. That's a good start. Who are going to tell us a little bit about their books. And I'm going to launch into the questions. So, Graham, would you like to go first?
I'll go first. I'll get a word in while I can.
I'm sorry, Graham. That's it now.
That's all right. I'm Graham Bartlett. I'm the author of, joint author of these two non-fictions, crime non-fictions. That's the true story behind the Peter James, Roy Grace novels, and that's a very harrowing non-fiction about a 32-year fight for justice regarding two girls that were murdered in the 80s. But I'm also a crime and policing advisor to authors, TV writers, and I work regularly with Kate and Lesley in trying to get authors the best authentic information they've got so that their stories are really underpinned with reality, but also are dramatic. So that's me.
Brilliant, thank you. And Lesley to go next.
So I'm Lesley McEvoy. I'm a behavioural analyst and profiler. But the old joke is that I found that there were more psychopaths in business than there were in prison. So for most of my working life, I've taken profiling into the corporate world. But I did do quite a lot of prison work, and that's kind of informed the books that I write now. My book is The Murder Mile. It came out last year. The protagonist is a forensic psychologist. So obviously she works on crime and she consults with the police, and it's set in a fictional Yorkshire town because I'm from Yorkshire. And book 2 is currently out with the agent, so watch this space. So that's me.
And Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Bendelow. I'm a CSI with 18 years experience. I'm also a writer, and I'm the author of The Real CSI, a forensic handbook for crime writers. And I'm just going to quickly whiz round and grab my book because I forgot to get coffee.
Good looking bookshelf.
It's not thrown together, this, is it? There we go. I've just written my first crime fiction novel is still currently trying to find a place with a willing agent or publisher. So if there's anyone out there who's interested, please do let me know. Please.
Very good.
Thank you, Graham. Oh, that was nice coming from you.
High praise indeed. Don't start. Right, so before we dive in, tell us a bit about the consultancy services that you offer. Lesley, I'm not sure if you actually offer them. Do you offer consultancy services at the moment, Lesley?
For writers? Do you mean for writers?
For writers, yeah.
For 30 odd years, I worked as a consultant, a freelance consultant, self-employed, mainly in the corporate world. So the profiling that I did was mainly for companies, profiling for either recruitment or at high level if they were going to bring in a senior exec or something like that, or with teams that were maybe not functioning for whatever reason. But I also did a lot of work in drug services and the prison service, and I worked with British Transport Police and the transport services, looking at how to spot unusual behaviours or suspicious behaviours and what staff should do about that in the light of terrorism and so on. Now I've given up the business to write full time, but if writers want to consult with me through Graham's website, what's the website again, Graham? Do you want to remind everybody?
Policeadvisor with an or.co.uk. And so that Leslie's profile and Kate's profile are on that site, and we offer the services to authors where we can do one-to-one chats. I mean, I did one this morning with an author who had specific questions, or we can help you develop characters or plot, or check your manuscript or part manuscript for authenticity. so we can really kind of get into some of the detail that might make your readers jar if it's wrong, but actually won't interfere with your story if you get it right.
So yeah, writing is the full-time job, but consulting with other writers now with Graham and Kate. If people want to know about creating a realistic villain, or I had one writer who had a character who was ex-military and had PTSD, and he wanted to ask me about how that would manifest. So that kind of thing. So yes, I do all that.
Brilliant. And Kate, let's come to you next. About consultancy.
Consultancy. I have a few writer friends who pick my brains, and I'm quite happy to work with them and read through stuff and advise them. And then Graham emails me with any questions any of his writers and whatnot have. For me, I love doing it. I love taking the time to do it because it's combining my two favourite things, my job and the love of writing. So I think it's always nice to be able to help other crime writers where we can.
It's also worth saying, Sam, that Kate and Lesley both joined me on. We ran a course recently, and we're going to rerun it very soon, which is basically immersing writers in a weekend of crime. And Kate and Lesley, we've got a pre-record interview that we do with them, and then they join me for a web chat with everyone, and it's fascinating because we give them a crime scene and tell them that to make a story around that, and then by the time Lesley and Kate come in, they're starting to get ideas and they're testing those with authenticity. So they're great fun as well, because as ever, Kate and Lesley get to be very rude to me, which they seem to be their main goal in life.
Before I ask you about your consultancy, Graham, you had an interesting person play the part of the victim.
Yeah. My for this crime course, my son was. I've got 3 children, and he was unanimously voted by the other 2 to be the victim. So we laid him out not literally laid him out as in punched him, but laid him out on the floor. My daughter went completely over the top with fake scars and blood, and we surrounded him with this crime scene, and we made him stay there for about 20 minutes, absolutely emotionless. But he's fine now. I think he's playing cricket this afternoon, so he's completely recovered. And of course, because he's living at home at the moment because of lockdown, I didn't pay him a penny, because I thought, well, I'm feeding him, so what more would he want?
Oh, lad.
Do you want to tell us about your consultancy services as well, Graham? Yeah,
so as I say, I kind of fell into it really because I'm one of Peter James's 2 police consultants, and when we bought Death Comes Knocking Out, a lot of people started to ask me whether I would help them, and it's kind of just rolled on from there. So as I said a moment ago, I provide expert advice to writers, be they debut authors or bestsellers like Peter and Mark Billingham and Ellie Griffiths, people like that. I've worked on some TV scripts, worked on We Hunt Together, which was out about 2 or 3 months ago, advising on that. But I'm also very, very aware that I don't know everything. I've never been. No one could be an expert in everything. So I've got a great team that are all profiled on the website, who work with me in providing specialist advice. So as Lesley and Kate are obviously in that team, and I've got a kidnap specialist, counter-terrorism specialist, so somebody that's very good around civil disasters, civil emergencies, that sort of thing, firearms specialist. So really, there's nothing that we can't take on that either we can't answer directly, or find somebody within an arm's length to advise. And our principle is always that the story comes first. So we will always find a way of ensuring that your story remains intact, whilst giving it credible and authentic procedure, characters, and plot all the way through. So as I say, we can go from answering a few questions to doing a complete manuscript review and edit, we get really good feedback on it, and of course the courses as well, that with the online courses that we run too, go down very well, and people keep coming back for more. So it's like work, but not like work, really. It's quite good fun.
If it all goes horribly wrong, we've got a really good team put together. We can all turn to crime. We've amassed a really good team for going out and committing crime. I think we'd be fine, really.
I thought you were going to say the A-team.
Yeah.
Well, if it all goes
I'd
wrong,
be the
we
one
have
who looked it
a
up.
life of crime.
So, Caroline Maston has asked, she says hello to you all for a start.
Hello,
Hi, Kaz.
Hi, Caroline.
She's asked Lesley, Lesley, what drew you into profiling? Which is another one of my questions. I was going to ask you what drew you into your particular fields. So let's start, Lesley. Not heard from you for a while.
Well, I started out, like most things, when I was at school, the careers officer never came in and offered that as a job. It wasn't anything that blipped on my radar. I started out doing ordinary jobs when I had what my mum and dad called proper jobs. And then I got into training, and I was doing corporate training, and I set up a corporate training business. And one of the things that I did back in the 80s to make it a bit different was I became an NLP practitioner, which is neuro-linguistic programming. And that was very big in a lot of businesses at the time, especially in sales organizations. So I was doing a lot of NLP, and that's very much about how the mind works and about how people process information. So that got me interested in that. And then from there, I just began this personal development of my own, and I became a hypnotherapist. But then that started to open up areas that I knew I wasn't qualified to deal with, because I'd be doing a course and I'd be talking about how the mind works and NLP and the unconscious mind, and people would hang around at the end of the course and say, I've got this problem, or more likely, I've got this friend who's got this problem. And so, and they used to start unburdening all this stuff, and I thought, I'm not really qualified to deal with this. So I became, over the course of a few years, a psychotherapist. And somebody that I met on my psychotherapy course was a behavioural analyst, and that really started to intrigue me. So all around the houses, I was gathering qualifications as I went along, and I became a behavioural analyst and profiler. And then that overtook everything. And when companies realised that I had that specialism, that was what I was getting asked for. So it was a convoluted route, really. I didn't kind of go from school and go the traditional route. It just kind of developed over years. And then once I started doing prison work, and I was working with charities like drug rehabilitation centres to talk about behaviour and how you can change somebody's behaviour, how you can map what is going wrong for them in their mind and how their mind is tripping them up, and then reprogram it almost to reprogram more useful behaviours. That then led into prison work, because drug rehab centres very often are associated with people that are coming out of prison. So then I ended up going into prisons to do behaviour management with both prison officers and prisoners. And so it went on from there.
And Kate, what about you? What led you to forensics?
I always, the dream was, when I was at school, I either wanted to be an actress, an author, or a police officer. So I've sort of ticked the author box. I've done a bit of acting, but the police officer was the main career vocation. And early on in my application, I found out I wouldn't be able to get in because my unaided eyesight was too bad. I've had laser surgery since, but at the time I was as blind as a bat. So after being devastated and knowing I wasn't going to get in the cops, my boss kicked me off to personnel and said, right, go and have a chat with them and see what else there is in the police, because I was working for the police at the time, but was in an admin role. And I knew I wanted to do something that involved working with the public. I didn't want to sit behind a desk every day. I wanted to do something that I could go out, help people and get my hands dirty. Well, they always say, be careful what you wish for. Some of the things, my hands have been dirty, and you would probably think it's the best career option, really. And it was the personnel department who told me about the job with the crime scene examiner. I hadn't heard about it, but the more she told me about it, I knew straight away that was what I wanted to do. I've always been one of these people who notices odd intricacies about things, and is really good at like if you lose the back of the earring, I'm always the one who finds it. I know Graham's heard this before, but I always pride myself that I can spot a semen stain on a beige carpet from several feet away, and that's quite a good quality to have in mind.
Quite a bad trick.
It's a good trick. A bit awkward when you're at other people's houses socially who you know, but it's handy at a crime scene. Anyway, let's skip over that. So yeah, when I heard about the job, I did photography at night school and got in the job with a photography qualification. Found who my local crime scene manager was, and basically hounded him. Got shadowing through him, and yeah, I was fortunate enough. I think they just gave me the job when I applied for it, just so I'd stop badgering them and stalking them all. Really, persistence pays off. That's what I mean.
Well, it seems to. How about you, Graham?
I can't remember a time when I didn't want to be a police officer. I mean, there's a bit of a family line. My uncle was in the police, and my dad was in the voluntary police. And I used to remember my uncle used to come round. Him and my dad were very close, and used to come round in the police car. And he was a traffic officer. You know, this lovely white hat, and then they used to get radioed and used to shoot off on blue lights and two tones. And I was about sort of 7 or 8 at the time. I think, yeah, I'll have a piece of that. And I never really thought about anything else. And it used to scare the life out of my mum, because she used to think, well, what's your plan B? And I said, well, I'll apply for Sussex Police first of all. And if I don't get into them, there's 43 other forces that I can apply to. So I'll keep going really until someone gives me a job. Yeah, I've always wanted to do it. And then I kind of, after a couple of years in the police, I started to develop, as you do, once you got your head around the job a little bit, I started to develop, a real sort of leaning towards being a detective, as opposed to, being what my uncle did, which was a fast car driver. I was a terrible driver anyway, so I'd never have lasted in that role. And then I became a detective and kind of stayed in that role really until almost the end, when I ended up at Brighton and Hove doing the job that I was last in. But so I could never do Kate's job, because before she says so, I have got previous for missing a gunshot wound to somebody's head. So semen stains on carpets are way beyond my capabilities.
I have to ask.
You do, don't you? You have to.
Yeah, you've got to ask. You walked right into that one.
It was
Kate,
the tiniest.
Kate, do you want to tell us how we missed it?
Kate gets in there every time with that one.
He can have himself.
I had been a firearms officer at Gatwick Airport previously, and had always been told that a gunshot wound had a small entry wound and a massive exit wound, and that was always what I was taught. So when I got called to this person in the back of a camper van who had like an abrasion on the side of his head, tiny abrasion, the tiniest abrasion you've ever seen. I thought he'd fallen over and banged his head. Luckily, I treated it as an unexplained death, so we made sure we got all the proper post-mortems. And that tiny, barely visible exit wound, that was the exit wound. So the entry wound it actually closed over, and it was off a 2-2 round. And if anyone says that's not possible, I'll fight you to the death on it, because I've saved my reputation on the fact that 2-2 rounds enter almost invisibly and exit very, very small. But I in Death Comes Knocking, I had to write that story of Death Comes Knocking, because if I did, I wasn't proud of it, obviously, but if I didn't, all of my ex-colleagues would have cried foul. So the whole story's in there, and it's basically the case for my defence. So yeah, that's the only time I've done it. It's the only time I've missed one. I might have missed loads without realising it.
But then you think over the length of time of your career, how many deaths have you gone, no, it's not suspicious, it's fine?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Oh my word! I can see I'm going to end up refereeing you to. Oh no! Move on. Are there any topics you don't like to talk, write, or consult about? That's from Kaz. So I'll start with you, Lesley. Is there anything that you wouldn't like to write about?
There isn't anything that I wouldn't talk about. So, because in the job I've done, I suppose it's a bit the same for Graham and Kate. There isn't anything you've not heard. I mean, I often get clients who sit with me and say, I don't want to tell you this because you're going to be shocked. And I don't think there's anything that I haven't seen or heard. I'm not very shockable. So there's nothing I wouldn't talk about. Is there anything I wouldn't write about? For me, and it's just a personal thing, I don't like dealing with paedophilia or crimes that involve children, because having been involved in some of that, I find that very difficult, and I don't find it pleasurable to think about it. And when you write a book, a fiction, I think people don't realize how long you live with that book. When you start to write it, you know, I mean, I'm not a very fast writer, so it can take me 8 or 9 months to finish it. Then it goes through various drafts and edits and so on. You can be living with that book intimately for a year and a half or more, and that's not a subject that I want to eat and sleep and breathe for 2 years of my life, because I've been too involved with it in prisons, and it's not a subject I find. And I don't read books that have that as a subject matter either. But that's my personal preference.
Yeah, I find it a tricky question to ask Kate and Graham, because you've seen such horrible things close up. I would never want to sensationalize something serious, or so I'm going to let you answer, but I'm not looking for the worst thing you've ever seen or things that don't leave you. I'm not looking for anything like that. Just, any kind of thing that you think, I just don't want to deal with that again. Kate, shall we go ask you first?
Yeah, to be honest with you personally, I'm with Lesley. I would advocate everything Lesley said. It's in so much as well as that it's the paedophilia type of things, anything like that, any form of real sexual deviance as well. And again, I wouldn't like reading anything like that. The other thing as well, I'm sort of wary about that, because I know from first-hand experience, from sort of what I've experienced at work, that anything that's written on that subject matter is actually porn for paedophiles, if you like. If that's written graphically enough, a deviant sex offender will take a lot of gratification out of reading something like that. So that again, I'm with Lesley on that. That is one subject I would steer away from, and I wouldn't be comfortable. If somebody asked me for advice on advising on that, it wouldn't be something I'd be comfortable with. I don't know. Is it something you would ever advise on, Graham?
Yeah.
I would advise not to write it. That would be my advice.
Yeah, brilliant.
Exactly the same reasons. I think it can be seen as gratuitous. I mean, I still do a bit of work in safeguarding in another sort of form of my life, and so and the horror of child sex abuse is just unimaginable. And of course, a lot of people have lived through it, and we don't know. I mean, people keep it, keep it under wraps for all sorts of reasons. So, I would advise to steer away from it. The other thing that I wouldn't advise on, but I would be honest with people, are secret tactics, very covert tactics. So there are some things that the police are able to do, and security services are able to do, that I of course wouldn't put into the public domain. I ran a workshop back in the early part of the summer on intelligence and covert tactics, an online workshop. And was very clear at the beginning that no one's going to hear any secrets here, but it's just about how you tie everything together. But obviously, I mean, apart from the fact that I signed the Official Secrets Act when I joined the police, it's wrong to put stuff that that's operationally sensitive into the public domain. So I'll tell people I won't do that, and then I'll find a way around how the police got that piece of information that normally they would get through a very secret tactic.
I'm going to move us on slightly, because obviously we've gone a bit dark there. So I'm going to go back to your books. Do you read the reviews? Graham, let's start with you. I keep forgetting to ask one of you.
No, well, I when Death Comes Knocking came out, I started reading the reviews immediately, and you know, and I respect all sensible reviewers. And you know, if anyone's, you know, whatever star rating they give you, providing you know they've read the book and they've got something constructive to say about it, then I respect that. But I saw some ridiculous 1-star reviews on there that were just kind of, you know, just rude, basically. And I remember reading a few that they went, well, I think it was 1-star or maybe 2. And then I went to Harrogate for the first time, and I was watching a panel that was actually Peter James and Martina Cole, and he asked Peter asked Martina Cole that very question, and she said, I'm not going to do the impression of Martina Cole because only Martina Cole can do that impression. But she said, I never read the reviews. I never, you know, because, you know, if people like it, they like it, they'll buy it again. And if they don't, well, you know, that's my writing style. And for my own sanity now, I have to say, I don't read reviews. But that doesn't mean that I don't invite them, because I think they're useful for other people to steer them. But I think, and I read reviews on other people's books to help me choose what to read. But I think for me, it can become, I think I'm one of these people that, you know, suffers from, you know, I'm so, you know, I'll pick on the 1-star review amongst, you know, 200, you know, 4-star reviews or 5-star reviews. And I've got imposter syndrome and all of that. So I don't need the negativity. But, you know, I do respect people's right to write reviews, and if it's a 1-star review and they've got something constructive and they really don't like it, that's fine. But you know, my message is don't be rude to people, because they put a lot of work into that book, whether you like it or not.
I know that when my
absolutely
Lesley, when my book first came out, you can't help it. The very first time you do sort of jump on Amazon every day and you're looking, and because you have no idea when it's your first book how this is going to be received, you know, whether you've hit the right tone and whether you know it's going to be a success. And you know, it was very gratifying at first, like Graham, you know, at first they were all 5-star reviews, and that was fab. And you know, it really gives you a boost as an author, because as Graham says, you know, you could have, it can take you a year to write it and then another year before it sees the light of day. So you've kind of lived and breathed it. And then when your baby is born, you want everybody to love it as much as you do. So that was great. But then over time, inevitably, you start to get the lower star reviews. I think people are almost suspicious sometimes if they only see 5-star reviews. They think it's all your family and friends. But by the time you get to 200, you know, in my case, I haven't got that many friends, you know. In fact, I've probably only got a handful. So, because I'm very sad. So, you know, it doesn't take long before you get through family and friends. But I think, like Graham says, if it's a 3 or a 4-star review and they've obviously read the book and it's constructive and it's balanced, then you learn from it. I think what hurts writers is where somebody's just abusive and says things like, this is utter rubbish, you know, don't buy it. And you think, you know, respect the work that goes into it, even if it's not your cup of tea. I mean, I've had people who read romance reading mine and saying it's not what they expected and giving it a low review. Well, you know, the clues are in the title and it's not a romance.
Just gonna say, yeah.
You know, it does what it says on the tin. So I think if it's or somebody gave it a low star, for example, because it didn't arrive from Amazon when they said it was going to arrive. Well, you know, I do my best.
Oh, that drives me mad.
I don't deliver them. Do you know what I mean? So if you get a low review for something that's not within your control, that's quite annoying. But I think if I really don't like a book, I wouldn't be vitriolic on Amazon about it, because you do respect the work that goes into it. And so now I don't go looking unless somebody says they've posted a review. And as I saw on Facebook today, somebody kindly did. So I went on and had a look, and that's very nice. What I will say is that publishers do look. One thing that I'm learning now that book 2 is going out is that publishers that are looking at book 2 are obviously going on to Amazon to have a look and see how the first one did, because they comment on that. So it is important, but it can be painful, and you've got to have quite a thick skin. It's a bit like, somebody said to me when the book first came out, what is it like waiting for the reviews to come in? And I said, it's like walking down the street naked and waiting for the comments to come. Do you know, it's terrifying. It is utterly terrifying. So, not that I'd do that. Well,
it's not that bad doing that, but you know.
I was going to say, there's your party trick. Okay.
I'm probably on a register somewhere, but when that lapses, I might do it again. So.
Kate, do you read your reviews?
Yeah, I do. I'm very fortunate because my reviews have been very positive, but I suppose that's really because if you compare the nature of my books, probably a little bit, the fact it's a sort of a guidebook, it's in a bit of a different thing, so it's not as much open for criticism. And also because the fact it's absolutely brilliant, obviously it's a reason it's got really good reviews. But yeah, I'm very mindful of that. That is one thing. If I'm fortunate enough that my fiction writing takes off, I'm very much like both Lesley and Graham have said, I will suffer from imposter syndrome, and I think I would probably have to swerve the reviews because, like Graham said, you could get 5-star reviews, but all I'd be obsessing about is the 1-star. And I agree with what the others have said. I think I would be more as well we're more mindful to take constructive criticism from somebody who is a writer as opposed to a reader, just because you know that writer, like the others have said, has an appreciation for the amount of time and work and effort that goes into that book. So yeah, if I think when my fiction's out there, I'll be turning a blind eye to reviews. Ignorance is bliss.
Wouldn't blame you. Steve Munoz says hello, everyone.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
Caroline has asked, what's the biggest bugbear you have in crime novels, or the worst mistake people make? I think you'd all be good at picking things out there. Graham, let's start with you.
Well, I could pinch.
Don't
one
say
that
pens. I know Kate's already.
I could pinch one that I know Kate will say, so I won't. But so I'm gonna do another one, which is the perception that the police is a kind of aggressive, table thumping, Scotch swilling, adultering organisation, and that police officers are living on their wits and their nerves the whole time. One of the things that can really spoil a story for me is cliche police officers, where you get this you just get this persona that is so hackneyed, whereas police officers are normal people. They have normal lives. They come to work. Yeah, their work is unusual, but they are they're incredibly professional. Sometimes they're corrupt, sometimes they're incompetent, sometimes they treat their colleagues and the public badly, but in the main, they are professional people with a real pride in their job. Now, it doesn't mean they have to be boring. There's lots of other things that you can put in their way to make them more interesting, and a conflict between personal and professional life is always a great one. One of the things that I used to kind of struggle with my staff when I was in the police is that the conflict with home life, childcare and custody arrangements and picking the kids up and parents falling ill and caring responsibility, all of those sorts of things. You don't have to have somebody swigging from a bottle of scotch to have conflict. They can be investigating your serial killer, and then suddenly get called away because their mum's their mum needs to go into a home, or they've got childcare responsibility, and it's massively impactive on those officers, because they're literally torn between the two worlds. So cliched cops is my bugbear.
Yeah, Kate.
Mine, I've to hold my beer, Graham. I've got millions of these from fingerprints that are found on things like keys and door handles, which you wouldn't get in real life. My biggest one, I think the one I probably rant about the most, is when you read a book and it's depicted that every man and his dog gets to trample around the crime scene, and detectives come in with just snapping on a pair of gloves, and they don't wear scene suits, and that really is my biggest bugbear, where it's poor scene preservation, or even as well, there's been a couple of cases where you've read about the private investigator who's been allowed in crime scene or access to crime scene photographs. Things like that would never ever happen. So that sort of thing really does rattle me quite a lot. There's loads of things, I could just talk about it all day, of the things that
I've heard the pen rant. So
yeah, the pen rant, shifting things around with a pen, and yeah.
Which we see a lot on TV, and you see people go in and pick things up, and I'll move on to Lesley before I set you off.
Sam, as well, to be fair, I've actually seen, but well, unfortunately years ago, but I've seen it done in real life as well, and I've slapped a few wrists in my time.
Oh no.
Wasn't me.
No.
Wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of that.
You wouldn't have found anything to need working with a pen though, Graham, to be fair.
Lesley, how about you?
I think it's a bit the same as Graham. I think it's a bit different for me because obviously Graham and Kate work in an area where there is a procedure, and therefore anything that's glaringly doesn't follow procedure, like with Kate saying, cops that just snap on a pair of gloves and walk.
Yeah.
Or was Lesley gone?
Oh, Lesley's frozen, I think.
Has Lesley frozen on your screens as well? Lesley, if you can hear us, can you just refresh your browser, please? And I will move on to my next question. Did anything surprise you in your previous careers that has helped with your writing? Let's go to you first, Graham.
Sorry, can you say that again? Did anything?
In your previous career surprise you that's then gone on to help you in your writing?
I think without kind of picking out a particular event, I think that just the breadth and the diversity of human nature has helped me understand that actually any story is possible. People of all walks of life can do absolutely anything. They can they can become killers, they can become drug dealers. Drug dealers can become become sort of community worker. You can literally the human psyche, it holds no surprises for me anymore, because it's literally whatever you think couldn't happen has usually happened. So and when I'm writing, because like Kate, I'm writing fiction at the moment, and just sort of in the process of sort of hopefully trying to get it out there. But literally, and anything is possible. When I'm advising as well, I'll say to people, don't worry about how outlandish your storyline might be, because it will be credible. We might need to sort of put a few little bits in here and there, but it will be credible, even if you've got the vicar going around with an Uzi submachine gun, shooting the congregation up. Not that I've ever come across that, but nothing is out of bounds as far as crime fiction is concerned. And I've learned that by just seeing some weird and wonderful things and people over 30 years of policing.
Sorry,
we'll just go to Kate for the same question, and then we'll come back to yours. You did disappear.
Sorry.
We'll just go to Kate with the question that we've asked, and then we'll come back to the one with you beforehand. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Sam. Thanks. Yeah, again, I'd have to echo Graham. I think over the last 18 years, it's been some of the sites and the way, like Graham said, the diversity of different people, and even just sort of simple burglary scenes I've been in, which gives you an opportunity to see how other people live. I've been to some stunning houses that have been like practically mansions, and I've been to quite a few houses where they've been hoarders' homes, and it's mind-boggling to see how other people live. And I think one of the things that's probably affected me with my career over the year, that will probably come out more in my writing, or has influenced ideas for my writing, has been that some of the nicest people I've ever met have been murderers. And that sounds a really a really strange thing to say, but I'll give you an example of where one of the young men I ever met, he was lovely. At the time, he was probably younger than my nephew, so I had a real sort of maternal affinity towards him. And the poor guy he'd been out drinking with his friend in a nightclub. They'd had a row about a girl. It spilled outside on the pavement. He'd punched his friend, he'd hit the ground, and it sort of sobered him up. He picked his friend up, apologised, they walked home together, made friends, had a laugh about it, and the friend was found dead the following morning in bed, and the punch and the fall had resulted in, unfortunately, a fatal head injury. And the guy he was actually charged with manslaughter and served quite a few years. And like I say, one of the nicest young men I've ever met. Likewise, I've met a murderer who was older. He had a lot of history, mental health. He'd had a really bad upbringing, and he was in his 50s. He'd been drinking with a friend of his who was from an equally impoverished background, and they'd had too much to drink. He snapped one night and he killed his friend, and he didn't realise till he woke up the next day. And again, humbling to meet somebody who, despite all the problems he had, despite his alcoholism and the upbringing he'd had and all the abuse he'd suffered over the years, one of the genuinely most nicest, kindest people I've met. And if somebody would have told me that when I first started the job, like I say, a lot of offenders aren't bad people. If you can understand that, a lot of offenders just make really, really bad, regrettable decisions that then they have to live with for the rest of their life. Likewise, I've met some people in the job who are horrible people. They say the people in the prison cells sometimes are the nicest, but then it alludes back to what Lesley said earlier about most psychopaths being in the office environment. So, that's been quite an eye opener over the years.
I think we might have lost Lesley again.
Either that, or she's doing a really good job at musical statues.
Oh, she might just be refreshing the browser. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Point on Kate's point, because I think that absolutely hits the nail on the head. I often say to people that, murder is the one crime that we could all commit. I could never burgle a house, steal a car, deal drugs, but I could never say I'd never be able to commit a murder, because given the right circumstances, it might not be murder, it might be manslaughter or whatever, but that there is, the prisons are full of people whose first offence is murder, and would never have, the hour before they committed it, would never have thought they were capable of it.
That's really interesting. I would never have thought of that. I want to go back to Lesley while we've got you. Mistakes people in books.
Just apologise for the internet. We live out in the sticks here, and so the internet we don't have the traditional stuff. We have a mast, and at this time of night, all the neighbours' kids will be getting on the internet, and that's why it keeps flipping on me. I think a badly drawn baddie irritates me. If they were all foaming at the mouth and all had mental illnesses, they'd be easily caught. So I think any offender, and we'll stick to murder as soon as it's the subject, is, as Graham said, a lot of people.
I can still hear you, Lesley.
People, anybody's capable of committing a.
Nope.
It's gone.
It's gone. Gone again. Can you tell us a little bit about your fiction books that you're working on at the moment? Graham, should we start with you?
Yeah, okay. So mine is about policing, surprise, but it's not a police procedure in the traditional sense. So it's a story about how where policing is cut so drastically that state-sponsored vigilantism takes over, and this group of vigilantes start operating in direct competition with the police, with paedophiles, burglars, domestic abusers, drug dealers being taken off the street and ensconced in this Victorian or Napoleonic prison, and it's how There's a massive body count in there, and then there's a very, very significant murder early on that actually brings the whole thing colliding. And it's how the police and the vigilantism work to sort of work against each other and create absolute carnage. It was supposed to be, when I started writing it a long time ago, it was supposed to be set into the near future, but the way things are going with policing, it's actually becoming a very contemporary fiction.
Lesley, let's just come to you to finish your answer about badly drawn baddies.
Badly drawn baddies, yeah. They're not all foaming at the mouth. And I think the other thing is there are certain cliches with psychopathy, for example, that there's it was an old-fashioned thing called the triage of psychopathy, which was that they've had a history of cruelty to animals, bedwetting, setting fires, and that held sway for a long time. Now, whilst there are flags that indicate it's old hat now, but I see that trope being trotted out again and again, that, as children, and any parent who's got a child who wets the bed must sleep with one eye open, worrying that they're harboring some future psychopath, and so that's an old cliche, so that irritates me when people trot that out. And also that a lot of offenders have come from appalling childhoods or appalling backgrounds, and many of them have suffered abuse. But I think it's very disingenuous to create that trope with everybody, because there are a lot of people out there who've been victorious over bad starts in life, who've had bad childhoods, who've had come from abusive backgrounds, who've gone on to do great things and be pillars of the community and never commit a crime. And I think to always trot that one out, does a disservice to all the people who don't go to the dark side because of those bad starts. So I think you've got to make a baddie as balanced as your protagonist, because offenders, as Graham will attest, come from all different backgrounds. I've been into category A prisons, onto wings with murderers, and you've got the whole gamut there, from people who do have mental health issues, who really shouldn't be in prison, but that's a whole new story, to people who could have been CEOs of companies, or who were successful entrepreneurs, but given the right circumstances, given the right triggers, as Graham has said, a killing is something that most people, given the right triggers, are capable of, and therefore, you get them across all stripes of society. And I think writers should bear that in mind.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Kate to ask about your fiction work that you're working on at the moment.
My novel is a police procedural with a difference, because obviously my main protagonist is a CSI or a SOCO, if you prefer that term, rather than a police officer.
What do you prefer?
I prefer SOCO.
Okay.
My character is new with the job. She's a recently recruited SOCO, and she attends a first sudden death, which appears non-suspicious, but as she's leaving the scene, she gets an inkling that everything isn't actually as non-suspicious as it seems. Then there's a series of other deaths happen, and she recognises that they're all the people who are dying are notorious criminals. Again, all the deaths seemingly non-suspicious, but she sort of can't give up this suspicion that she has, this gut instinct that there is something wrong about them all. So as that continues to sort of eat away at her, she's trying to do a job without being alienating herself from a team, and also keeping a family secret, which, if that's revealed, could potentially jeopardise a job. So yeah,
I look forward to reading that. Lesley, what's your second book? Can you talk about that at the moment?
I can't give too much away. I can't give too much. It's
no spoilers.
No, it's a follow-on from The Murder Mile, in as much as it's the second in the series. So it's my main protagonist, Jo McCready, is a forensic psychologist. So she gets called in to just look at a video, and it actually was sparked by an event that happened when I was working down south with the railway companies. I happened to be in an office for something else, and they'd got some CCTV footage of an attack on a station platform, and they said, while you're here, do you want to just have a look at this and tell us what you think? And that's kind of sparked the idea for this book. And she watches this, and it looks like it's racially motivated. It looks like it's a terrorist attack, but there are things about it that just don't feel right. And so she starts to pursue that. And so ultimately the book is about mind control. Can minds be controlled? Does mind control really exist? Does brainwashing really exist? People ask me that. And so the premise is around that.
I'm really glad to hear that Joe's getting a second book.
Well, hopefully, if somebody takes it, yes.
Graham, how much has your gut instinct played a part during your career and with writing? Do you believe in gut instinct?
Yeah, I do on a surface level. I think experience, human nature, that they all kind of they all lead into gut instinct. But what I was told very, very early on in my career, and I repeated to people that I supervised later on, is that very often, if you listen, you must listen to your gut instinct. So if you think something's not right here, something is amiss, or there just needs to be a few more questions. That might feel like gut instinct, but actually, if you analyze it and think about it carefully, there will be something that has triggered that. So it might be, you might think, oh, there's something not right here. And just to give a simple example, you've got a reclusive person, yet there are two wine glasses on the table. It's things like that. But I always used to say to officers, because this was what was said to me, strip it down and work out what it is that's giving you that uncomfortable feeling. You can't go around arresting people on gut instinct. You can't go kicking doors in and to search premises on gut instinct. So you have to be able to articulate what's giving you that suspicion. So I do believe in it, and I think it's something that we, probably Lesley knows more about this as a psychologist than I would, but it is something that's real, but it's also tangible.
Yeah.
Kate, what do you think about? We've heard how good your eyesight is, what you can spot from 7 feet. How's your gut?
Yeah, there's a real balancing act when it comes to examining a crime scene, and between unconscious bias and gut instinct and intuition. And I've had a lot of examples where my gut instinct and my intuition has paid off when I've been working at a serious scene like a murder scene and stuff. It is definitely something I consider. Like I say, unconscious bias is a thing as well. You have to consider that. But gut instinct for me, definitely. And even from, not even just from the point of view of examining a scene, personally speaking for me, from a safety perspective, because I'm not a police officer, I'm employed by the police in a civilian role. I go out and about on my own. I have a police radio with me. I don't have any body armour. I don't have any self-defence training. So I can walk in other people's houses or pubs or different various scenes and locations on my own. And the one thing I was taught very early on in the job was listen to your instinct. If your spidey senses are going when you're walking into a job and you think for whatever reason you're not happy, I'll get out. And I've done that a number of times. Sometimes I've pulled up outside a location and I've thought, I'm not too sure about this. Instincts are going. I might approach the address, but I'll leave my equipment in the van. And then that way I've got an excuse to walk straight out and drive away. I've done that before. So yeah, I'm all for intuition and gut instinct, definitely.
Lesley, obviously you might have a different take on it.
I know how it works, and I think you should take notice of it. As Kate calls it, the spidey senses. The way it works is that your unconscious mind is always on alert, even when you're asleep. The unconscious mind never sleeps, and the unconscious exists to keep you safe. That's its main purpose in life. And it has a database that you've stored from the moment you were born of situations, people. This thing about, when something doesn't feel right, but you're not sure why. The conscious mind can't put your finger on it. The conscious mind can't quantify why you feel uncomfortable. But the unconscious mind has picked up something that might be so fleeting that you can't you're not consciously aware of it. It could be a smell, it can be a look, it can be a feeling, and your unconscious mind sends you a warning signal. And it's the amygdala part of the brain. It's what we call the lizard part of the brain. It's the prehistoric animal part of the brain that is on high alert to keep you safe 24 hours a day. And I teach people to tune into that, because we have a heightened awareness of a predator. We all have it. If you've ever been with anybody and the hair stands up on the back of your neck, but you don't know why, especially women, quite often they get uncomfortable and they don't know why. But society tells you to override it because you don't want to appear rude. Well, I have no problem being rude, as it might surprise you to learn.
But, I wouldn't have problem if it was somebody that made my skin crawl. No, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
But for example, when you're training, when I used to do training with lone workers, for example, or I'll give you an example we can all relate to. A guy pulls up in a car, and I'm not being sexist here, but it's a scenario we can all relate to. Guy pulls up in a car, winds the window down, says, "Excuse me, love," and gives you the kind of all the signals. To be polite, young girls will often be taught, they don't want to appear rude. They're going to walk over, they're going to put their head in the car, and that's all a predator needs. They bank on your politeness. They bank on that social interaction that we're all trained to dance, to respond in a certain way. Somebody says hello and smiles. In our society, you're unless you live in London, obviously, you're taught to respond back with a hello. But that's all a predator will need to rule, get you close to the water's edge of a watering hole, and an alligator comes out and grabs you. So, I teach people, if somebody pulls up in a car and winds the window down, stay on the curb, don't go to the car. And if they go, "Excuse me," stay put, so I can hear you quite well from where I am. It's all that sort of thing. So sometimes, given the job I do, and Graham's probably the same, if I go into a pub or a restaurant, I don't stand or sit with my back to the door. I always sit facing out into a room. I'm always scanning a crowd. I'm always, if I'm walking in a crowd, and I've done it on the underground, for example, I'm standing on the platform and I'm looking, and I can see micro expressions, micro behaviors at 50 feet. And I'm thinking that person is up to no good. And I once watched a guy that I just had this spidey sense on the underground, and I knew there was something off, and he was watching trains come and go and he wasn't getting on. So I didn't get on either because I'm watching him. And he was a pickpocket on the underground. So this gut instinct is your unconscious mind scanning for everything, the slightest off body language, off eye contact, or too much eye contact, or whatever, and it knows, and you need to tune into that. It might take you a while to quantify or be able to explain to somebody else, but it's not wrong.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
We've got a comment on the stream that Caroline tells me is from Effie Merrill, which says, "I can vouch for that course, having done it, it's fabulous." So there you go. High praise for the course.
Hi, Effie.
It was great on the course as well, because without sort of, she's ex-police, so she was able to bring in another dimension, and it was a great. The community between the people on the course. There's a lot of work they do together, critiquing each other's work. It was amazing. They were, sometimes when I chipped in, I felt I was kind of gate crashing their party, because they were so engaged and enlivened with each other. It was fabulous. I think they're all exhausted at the end of it, to be honest.
Definitely.
We are literally running out of time. So do you want to show us your books again? I've got many questions left, but we'll save them for another day. So, Kate, do you want to go first?
Oh.
It's okay. You can sit and hold your books in the background. It's fine.
Okay.
So, Kate, go on. Tell us about yours.
Yeah, so as I said previously, the Real CSI, a forensic handbook for crime writers. It basically looks at what goes on behind the crime scene tape. It talks through crime scene preservation, evidence types that we look for, everything. It's also, although it is aimed for crime writers, I've had a lot of feedback that a lot of crime readers have found it really, really interesting. And basically anybody who's interested in the role of the CSI or forensics, see how what the job entails and what we do, including working with other experts such as pathologists. So go on, treat yourself. It's a bank holiday weekend. Get on Amazon. Just buy now with one click.
Love it, Graham.
So two here. The Death Comes Knocking was the. I can't remember. Sorry. Death Comes Knocking is the true stories behind Peter James's, Roy Grace's novels. It includes things like how a detective can miss a bullet wound. It talks about some of the things that can emotionally disturb officers. It talks about some horrendous crimes and things like death messages, police humour, and police corruption. So that's that one. And this one is the story of the investigation into this chap who's Russell Bishop, who killed 2 girls in the late 1980s, got away with it, nearly killed another one. And it took 32 years, a change of law and a change of science to finally bring him to justice. And it's, again, the inside story of how that happened.
Just before we go to Lesley, you had a really interesting review on one of those books.
All right. It's a bit nerve-wracking. Go on.
One that you were telling me about the other day. You were saying that somebody had said there was too much of something in one of the books.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. In Death Comes Knocking, if you look at the title, Police in Roy Grace's Brighton, there was a 1 or 2 star review because there was too much about Roy Grace and Peter James's novels in there. Maybe buy some romance or something. It says it on the cover what you're getting. Yeah. But there you go. What did you do?
Lesley, what did you write that review for?
Don't mess me up, kid. Don't mess me up. You said you'd never say.
Lesley, show us your book.
Lesley,
show us the Murder Mile.
Murder Mile. So, as a profiler, the idea behind the Murder Mile was to pit the top profiler against the archetypal top serial killer, and the one serial killer who has gone down in history as the most infamous is Jack the Ripper from 1888 in London, because obviously he was never caught, and because there's a lot of theories about who he might have been or who she might have been. Was it Jill the Ripper? So as a profiler, I've always been fascinated by Jack, and a lot of work has been done with modern technology now, with the Holmes computer and behavioural profiling, to now come up with a modern take on Jack and maybe work out who he was using the historical facts that we have. So I wanted Joe McCready to be pitted against the archetypal, most infamous serial killer of all time. So the story behind that is that a serial killer starts replicating the murders of Jack the Ripper from 1888 on the same dates, at the same time, with the same wounds, and she has to track down the new Jack the Ripper, and that's the premise of the Murder Mile.
And it's absolutely fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining us. I've had a wonderful week, just over an hour, and I can't wait to have you all back again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone.